Welcome, everybody, to a very special episode of the Strength and Knowledge Podcast. We are a little over a month out from our online summit, and I am very, very excited to bring to you today somebody who will be joining us that day and be one of our featured presenters. She has a very, very strong background when it comes to being a fitness and strength professional. Please welcome Michelle Boland.
What's up, Josh? How you doing? By the way, I have to say, one of my really good friends has the same last name as you. And I think it's one of the best last names that exists.
How many nicknames? You're going to have to ask them, obviously, at a later time. But how many nicknames did they have growing up? I counted one day, and it was 17. It's crazy how many different things people go, hey, Funky, Funky Monkey, Funk Flex, Funk Doctor. And you're like, okay, like, I've heard it. Like, I've literally heard them all at this point. But, Michelle, people want to know just a little bit more. You've done such a good job at carving out a niche. A lot of people will struggle with regards to longevity when it comes to being a strength fitness professional. What are some things that you think have really allowed you to not only have longevity in the field, but do such a good job with regards to branding and really elevating yourself as somebody that people are seeking out when it comes to improving themselves?
Oh, wow. That's awesome. There's a couple things I think of when you say all that stuff. Number one, in terms of like branding, I think having my brand as myself or my name helps me with that. So people are coming for Michelle Boland, not, another company name related to fitness, like specifically using my name and branding. In terms of, my kind of journey in the field of how I kind of perceive longevity is making sure that I'm not being someone who other people want me to be or I feel like I should be. And that goes into kind of the schools of thought I've come from. In previous maybe years, I kind of took, I think it was like 12 to 13 posture restoration courses. And I feel like that was kind of something that people labeled me of. And I kind of maybe went through the stage of becoming like resentful towards that and really kind of turning and being like, well, that's not who I am. That's not who I want to be as a coach. I'm not just someone of one school of thought or one way of doing things. So I've kind of really tried to make sure I give credit where credit is due of things to learn from, but really trying to be myself and figure out who I want to be as a strength conditioning coach. And then also a part of that is I feel like I have innate organizational, really like being in school. And a part of that was taking information and then organizing a certain way to try to make it clear to people and clear to myself about what we are doing. And I try to do that a lot in my content. And I think that as a learning skill has carried over to a lot of things in my life to kind of pursue my career, especially my company or my business.
Yeah, and you've done such a good job, I think, at really, I don't want to say like redefining yourself, but obviously you've had some different roles over the years. You've been more in a college institution. You have had opportunities where you say have been employed by other people. And then obviously more lately with regards to, at least I'm thinking about your website, Michelle Boland Training, and seeming like everything pretty much is going through you. Can you talk about what it's been like to just kind of go through the transition of roles and some things that maybe were unique about each of those three different environments?
That's an awesome question. I'm so thankful for the diversity of experiences that I have. So I started off in the collegiate. I worked for Division I sports performance department. So, I was in charge of, a top 5 hockey program in the country. And
you just sounded a little Canadian there, by the way. You just, right? You got the little
Oh no, oh no.
hockey, right?
I've learned some stuff being around hockey players, that's for sure.
Sorry, keep
Maybe my
going.
Boston accent has curved.
Yeah, it
No,
might help out. I got a little
I
Minnesota.
started off in that.
All right.
I'll try to not go west here. I'll try to revert back to my Boston accent. I'll try as hard as I can. Um, the Division One collegiate program, it was one of those things where I came in and I'm like, oh man, I have no idea what I'm doing. And you kind of, when you're in a new environment, especially when you have a new job, you have to give yourself, 6 months to a year to really say or truly have an idea of what that experience is going to be, because you're just trying to get your feet wet, know the environment, know the people around you, to make a, true understanding of like what that job is going to entail or what your role in that job is going to entail. So I think it took me like my first year at Northeastern University to really figure out myself how I was going to coach people, how to deal with coaches in your ear or people who aren't, happy about a certain thing, dealing with other people around you. That's a very unique experience because you're training people in the every time that you are to 40 people in the room. So there's a lot of logistics you have to learn, dealing with group settings, being in front of a large audience. And then the next step was I was the director of education at a private training facility, which is like the polar opposite of that experience. Everything is one-on-one, private coaching. You're dealing with people on kind of the opposite end of the spectrums, kind of the older clientele, 40s, 50s, 60s, and then people who are at the youth level, so high school and down. So kind of you're getting out of that window I had in the collegiate setting of 18 to 22-year-olds, people who basically can like do anything you ask them to do, and now you're dealing with people who are new to training, new to fitness, lifting weights, and you kind of have to teach people from scratch, which is a new challenge in itself. You have to learn how to communicate. A big thing with that, which I don't think I was good at all in that experience, was communicating people like why they should pay you. Like the marketing aspect of it, bringing people in, explaining what you do and making them actually care about it. But it wasn't until I probably went off on my own where I really got a hang of, how to market to people. I really had to prioritizing my continuing education from more like biomechanical training stuff to completely learning and getting a mentor for marketing, how to grow my business, how to grow online. That was a whole new ball game for me. And I think I've learned a lot about how to sell myself, because at the end of the day, this is my job. I need to get people to coach in the gym. So that's priority number one. So that's probably been the biggest learning experience since I started off on my own.
I think, that honestly is probably a perfect segue into almost your topic at the online summit as it relates to training inactive individuals with more of an athletic focus. And I think you might find yourself in a situation where you have conversations, maybe they're a little bit more challenging, where people are looking at some of the things that you're trying to accomplish with them and maybe wondering why. Talk to me a little bit about how you go into some of these situations with somebody who has not been active, and maybe some of the reframing or some of the frequent conversations that you're having as you do your best to justify the why of what you're doing.
No, that's perfect. And I think that is one of the most important things we can do is take a step back and really think about why we're doing what we're doing. And when I go through that process, I step back and look at, the whole forest of like, what strength and conditioning is, where it came from, the foundation of it, what people's perception or expectations are when they come to see me. If I can understand that first, then I can communicate better with people. So relating to my topic in general population clients, the foundation of strength and conditioning, where I came from out of my education, everything's really founded from, getting people better at sports. In terms of the foundation of strength conditioning, I think came from powerlifting, which is a sport, and Olympic weightlifting, which is a sport. And then our profession kind of grew into, okay, how do we make athletes better at their sport outside of training for their sport? Okay, and then we kind of snowball and our field grows, and now we're interacting and servicing more people who aren't in athletics, aren't training for sports. But we're so hyper focused on training like athletes. So we have to take a step even further back and define terms. So define what athleticism is, what are athletic qualities, and then say, okay, why are these things important to implement in my inactive clientele? And I think a lot of the expectations with what I basically just said are all purely physical. And what I want to dive down into is how we can really talk about maybe more cognitive, emotional aspects of athleticism and how we're going to turn those into physical expressions of athleticism. And let me give you a few examples here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to separate, okay, what's kind of different from a high-level athlete and an inactive client that I have? So I would say there's multiple things. The first one I'm going to say is an athlete has a wide range of predictive abilities. So they can react to things a lot quicker than my inactive clients. So we'll talk about how to turn that into physical training and make them better at being able to react to things. And then I want to talk about, well, why is it important for my inactive clients to be more reactive and have better predictable capabilities? We could also talk about this in terms of the rehab setting as well. Another example of that is like an athlete has a wider range of perceived capabilities. To me, this is the biggest one because the majority of my inactive clients don't have goals. So going back to your question, it's like, they may care less about the physical adaptations or the physical type of things that they're going to be performing. I would probably want their experience or goals to be allowing them to experience things that they never thought that they would be able to be capable of doing. I think that is probably the most important things that I can do as a strength conditioning coach or personal trainer in the general population sector. And then even moving further beyond that, it would be athletes are more goal oriented. You really don't have to motivate them too much. They know what they're fighting for, right? And then that's a challenge in the inactive client population because they don't always know a reason why, they need physical activity or need exercise or want to enjoy it. That's a huge challenge and barrier when you're working with people and trying to communicate what you're doing. And then I have a few other examples more related to, physical aspects, such as athletes have a wider range of capabilities in intensity and force production. So like inactive clients, if you ask them to jog, it probably looks exactly the same as if you ask them to sprint, right? And so, how can you widen that range? And why is that important? And same exact for bioenergetics, right? So can you get someone to perform something longer duration and shorter duration? Do they have that kind of switch back and forth? And athletes do have that. And then coordination, body awareness, do they even understand like where their leg is in space when they're moving? And you can relate that to some balance type of activities or positions. And then the last one is, I don't believe that there's movement patterns that are athletically associated. So for example, like, when someone says like movement patterns like lunge, hip hinge, knee dominant, push pull, those are things that everyone should be able to be capable of doing. So what's the difference between like athletes and inactive clients? Well, it's their ability to link those patterns and skills together and perform them at higher intensities. So I'm just going to try to dive into, why is all this stuff important? And then going back to like the foundation of strength conditioning, it's like, can we rethink, the barbell? Can we rethink Olympic lifts? What are the fitness qualities we're getting from these type of implements, and stepping away and still implementing the same fitness qualities, just with different methods that our inactive clients can actually have a chance to perform? That's kind of a mouthful.
I love it. I mean, I'm sitting here going, man, I just keep talking to Springfield graduates and they're also very impressive. I mean, that was very, very well done. Great outline. I think you helped me paint or at least paint a picture in my head of how things are going, at least initially. When you talk about generating buy-in with some of these people who are newer or completely new to this kind of an approach to their personal development, are there any different strategies as it relates to the short term and long term?
That's a really good question. I would say when I deal with someone new, usually an older adult, what I always really find is there's fear associated with what we're going to be doing. So for example, a lot of my clients say, like out loud, they will not leave the ground. Like they don't expect me to jump, don't expect me to throw that fast. A lot of my clients will come in and be like, I can't do a split squat because of my knee. I can't do this because of my shoulder. A lot of the communication has to be, I hear you, I'm listening. Let's try to see what we can do. And so for the short term, I would say it's short-term wins of maybe taking an exercise that they don't perceive as a split squat, or if they don't perceive it as a movement that they fear, and then being like, oh, you just accomplished that fear. See how you did that? And they're like, oh, getting them to realize that they can do things. It may not look like something that they thought it was going to. So in the short term, it's getting those wins of being like, oh, you are capable of doing this. Like, so for example, when I say someone's fearful of leaving the ground, I try to get my older clients to skip immediately. And then looking back after they do it, I'm going to be like, you just look around. Like you just did what you thought you were incapable of doing. And then for the long term, I'll pick like a big challenge. So say, for example, a lady came in and she said she would never be able to do something in a lunge position or split squat position. Well, I put that in my head as a long-term goal to get them to be able to do that.
I love that. I mean, I think it's, I keep coming back to, as you're talking and your presentation topic, thinking about pushing ceilings higher, right? And I think about recently, just on a concept standpoint, just in terms of everything going on this year, associated with ceilings for females that had once been put on, unfortunately, by other people. And when we look at like the Vanderbilt kicker last weekend, like she's raising the ceiling higher for female student athletes. And for you, being in a profession that people typically would associate it with being male dominated, you carving out your own respective niche as a female, are there any things that you've encountered or things that you're being mindful of as you continue to push into space that many would say is more male dominated and creating space for more females?
That's a really good question, and I do get that frequently. I would say something that I'm very conscious of, and I do in the back, kind of expressing it to like a public audience of, I make sure that as I lift, I help others rise. So if I encounter young female coaches, or if someone's in like a group mentorship of mine, I will make sure that I contact them individually and help them succeed in any way possible that I can, just so, I can do that for someone as I make room for myself. So I want to make room for more females in this fitness industry. That's one of my personal goals. I personally have been lucky enough to be surrounded in some great environments, but I have been exposed to and heard of other, just very other environments that aren't well suited for females in this industry. And I think it's just, being conscious of like what you want to represent, because sometimes I see that there's only really room for females who are willing to kind of be very aesthetics based. So, I'll joke around with you'll never see me with my shirt off. Like, it's just not going to happen. Like, and being more focused on intellectually, like what I have to offer. And I think overall people respect that, no matter what like gender I am. So I think I'm kind of conscious in relation to representing myself intellectually when it comes to training and performance. Something I do struggle with is trying to fit in terms of, I'm in the field of weightlifting. A lot of guys succeed in terms of personal abilities to lift heavy things. But, I don't think anyone's going to really be impressed of like what a 120-pound female can lift. And sometimes I think I try to prove that I'm like just as strong or relatively equal. But then it's like, well, what am I fighting for as a female? Is there room for that? Is that going to attract my ideal clientele? And so I also think I'm mindful of speaking at the level of understanding of my listener, or everything I say is geared toward the people who I want to attract, and not just feeding my own ego of proving that I belong somewhere.
I love that. I think, it's very obvious to see, especially things on social media, where there's definitely almost a divide between, as you mentioned, some of the more aesthetic related fitness topics and things that are going on that females are putting out. And then definitely some, the other half of the equation where you have some people like yourself that are really honing in on the intellectual side. And I'd say putting themselves in a position where just the focus and the messaging is in stark contrast. And I can definitely see the struggles associated with things like engagement, right? Let's just be honest. And I really respect it. And I can definitely notice when it's intentional, and could see just the pulling when you see certain things and you see people who have millions of followers and you see the things they're posting, and then you see the other side of the equation where you're like, well, I understand why there's a difference if you just look at human psychology in itself, but like there's clearly a very, very different intent and value add. So my hat's off to you there.
I think you just have to be very thoughtful.
And I'm skirting that topic a little bit, but
I think you just have to be very thoughtful about who you are. You have to understand yourself, and then who you want to represent, and a sense of responsibility towards that, and not being pulled into directions where you think you should be a certain way, you think this will sell, think this will make you money, this will get you attention. I think you just have to be, very purposeful about you put out there, because social media is a scary thing. Not just talking about gender, but moving on from that, it's what you put out there never goes away. Yep. And you need to be thoughtful about what you put out there.
I agree.
I'll get off my high horse.
I'm with you. We could probably spend an hour on those topics, but it's a slippery slope. Just balancing marketing, but also balancing quality and things that are meaningful and things that are contributing to other people improving themselves as a professional, as opposed to things that are maybe a little bit more superficial that people just hit the heart button on, it's just because they like how it looks. But to finish today, I always like to ask people, what are the biggest changes that you've made to either your training process or your decision-making process over the past 2 years?
Ooh, that's a good one. I would say honing in on my templates. So sometimes I think we could get carried away on how long it takes us to program. Like we could be spending 2 hours, 3 hours on one client. But I've tried to make sure that I create templates that represent who I am, how I want to do things, but then, I can plug and play based on the individual. And I think cleaning that process up has been huge for me when it comes to decision making and programming in my coaching.
It's awesome. Yeah. I think it's simple, short, to the point. I think at the end of the day, it's the constant appraisal, right? You're just constantly appraising yourself. Am I actually getting to where I want to get to? Am I actually getting the outcomes that I'm supposed to get? Am I actually connecting with the people? And as long as you keep asking the questions of yourself, I think you're always at least going to continue to grow. And ideally, you never get to a point where you stop asking those questions. And if you get to a point where you're just asking questions and you're just affirming yourself all the time, you're not asking the right questions either.
Yeah. And I think it's a lot of too, like learning from your failures. If you lose a client, don't just let them go away. Like ask, how can you improve, or, what made them, and you just learn from that moving forward. And you have to be humble enough to be able to do that.
Right. I'm with you. Well, Michelle, I really, really appreciate you carving out time for me. I know it's definitely been a wild year for both of us. But we're very much looking forward to your presentation, and you just joining us in January. So I appreciate you, and I'm just looking forward to your presentation. Where can people stay connected with you?
Perfect. So welcome. Send me a DM. I'm more active on Instagram at dr.michelleboland. You can also go to my website, michelleboland-training.com. Those are probably the easiest ways to get in touch with me.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Josh.